The Boston Celtics snatch victory from the jaws of defeat that were in the mouth of victory that they almost slammed shut. A wild Pacers Celtics game one happened. We'll try and make sense of it. Plus, all defense teams are out, and we'll preview Wolves-Mavs Western Conference Finals game one. This is Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA, your daily source for all things NBA from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day and being with us Monday through Friday. Do appreciate you guys being part of our community. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Smash it for us. Give us that support. Appreciate you guys doing so. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network. I'm joined by David Ramil. He's co-host of Locked On Heat. You can find me on Locked On Nuggets, as both of us have a lot of time on our hands as the respective teams that we cover have been eliminated from playoff contention. On today's show, we'll break down Celtics-Pacers game one in a wild, I don't even know what I just watched game. We'll talk about Wolves-Mavericks game one and preview that series, as well as the NBA's all-defense teams were announced on Tuesday. We'll break those down as well. David, where do you want to start with Pacers Celtics? Like, Celtics get off to a really hot start. They're up like 24-12. It looks like they're going to blow out the Pacers. Everyone's making jokes about how much this is so easy for Boston. And then just like the Knicks and the Bucks before them found out, you look up and like, oh, the Pacers hit another shot. Oh, the Pacers hit another shot. They're right there. They hang on. They take the lead. They lose their minds in the last 30 seconds of the game with a 3-point lead. Jaylen Brown forces a turnover and then hits a pull-up, catch-and-shoot 3-pointer to tie the game, coming back from 5 down in like 30 seconds. In overtime, Jason Tatum takes over, 10 points in clutch time. The Celtics fans are claiming this is a clutch win. I don't feel like it was. I feel like it was more of a clutch loss for the Pacers. But the Celtics do get the win. Like, no matter what, we can nitpick all of the ways that they've gotten here. There's 7 wins from the title.
That's a whole other conversation I'm not sure I'm ready to have right now, because a lot of people are kind of already carving out the gravestone for the Pacers, and I wonder how they'll respond. Look, I know they took advantage of a Knicks team that was basically a mash unit by game 7, but at the same time, they did come back and they had, they found a way to make this a much more interesting game than I think a lot of people expected it to. And you bring up a good point. Like, this is their identity all season long. They'll find a way to outscore you. They won't defend particularly well, although I do think they did a pretty good job of that today in game 1. And still, I'm not sure exactly how they're going to find a way to make the series more competitive. But for now, I'm not sure that we need to look ahead to the rest of the series. Just game 1 itself has enough storylines. And I think the one that everybody's kind of looking at is the reality that Indiana kind of choked the game away. And you look at even prior to the Pascal Siakam turnover that Brown sort of forced or maybe fouled on, who knows, he wasn't going to get called for it anyway. And that's a free throw disparity that I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. But you also look at, Tyrese Halliburton bringing the ball up court and dribbling the ball off his knee within the last 30 seconds of the game. Another unforced turnover that gave Boston an opportunity as well in the waning moments of regulation. And Indiana just did a pretty bad job of keeping their composure down the stretch. And in overtime, they couldn't really find a way to score. They had a lot of opportunities there. They couldn't really get the job done. Credit to Boston for scoring in those moments there, but I have a hard time, like you, giving Boston as much credit, because it just feels like this is a game that Indiana could have won had they just played even decently down the stretch, and that wasn't the case.
And like Boston. I understand Boston fans' frustration, because they're like, "What do you guys want us to do? We blow out these teams and we don't get credit for it because you say we got to face adversity. We come back from down 5 in the last 30 seconds and we get a win." And that's not good enough. That was just like whatever random craziness. Like, what do we have to do in order to get the respect that we deserve? And it's fair, right? Like,
Sure.
the Pacers played really well in this one, and they did come back to win, and they did have to dig deep to get this one into a win. It's just the Halliburton turnover where it was unforced, and Rick Carlisle after the game, notably, he actually singled out that play and not fouling up three. He said, I should have called timeout. We should have reset it and won the game. And he's like, absolutely right. Because I think if I remember correctly, like it was bobbled off of like Siakam, like he was trying to get to the ball and they were trying to get it. And then like, they're just trying to push it up. And you could tell that in that moment, up 5 on Boston with a chance to go up 1-0 in the conference finals, like Halliburton just like got a little nervous and just loses
Bring
the
ball up. He was bringing the ball up, dribbled off his knee, kind of rolled meekly out of bounds, and Nesmith died for it and couldn't get to the ball in time. So it was ruled a turnover. But then there was that Siakam one later on where he's kind of just diving towards the ball. And I couldn't figure out why they couldn't call an official review to see if the ball had actually gone off of Siakam or Brown. And I know there was no challenge left from Carlisle to make that call, but I thought you could still make an official ruling and determine whether or not the ball had gone out of bounds on either player, but no out of bounds. They didn't review it. It was too late. They slowed they slowed the play down on the telecast, and it kind of looked like Brown had a hand in there. I'm not sure exactly who knocked the ball out. Didn't matter. But, that was with a few seconds left in the game. And then, look, credit to Brown. He did knock in a nice three-pointer from the corner in order to tie it up. And, again, they got the job done in overtime. But the Pacers just did not do a good job. And this was a team that has been really exciting all season long. And yet they have question marks and they still have glaring holes. But they did a really good job today despite, playing in Boston, down 12-0 early on. And they just found their offense and they kept coming. They got big play after big play defensively. And it was a great, even contribution from across the board. All the rotation players had a really, really good game. A number of players in double figures, and then just kind of crapped it all away. And this might be the story. It might be how exactly a lot of people expect it to play out. If they lose this game one, it's a really disheartening game for them, a bad loss. Can they come back? Can they show the kind of grit and tenacity to kind of fight their way past it against a really good Celtics team? I'm not sure. I don't know how they'll respond. Again, they responded well against the Knicks, but it was a Knicks team that had lost a number of players to injury. So I'm not sure how Indiana responds to this. Maybe they'll kind of buoy themselves, and maybe they'll find a way to kind of just, use this as a rally call and say, we were right there had we not make those mistakes. And maybe they'll play a little bit more freely and a little bit more effectively. But they played so well for about 40 minutes of this game, aside from that bad start and the bad finish. Aside from that, they were really damn good, but not enough to get it done.
I love this for Miles Turner. He says, people will talk about the free throw discrepancy. I'll mention that in a second, but it's no excuse when you turn the ball over 21 times. So the Pacers showed their age. That to me really is like, is it like, I am going to be always very lenient on this Pacers team. Everyone is like trying to tear them down. I'm like, guys, they don't know what they're doing. Like Nembhard, never been in the playoffs. Nesmith has one run. Halliburton, never been in the playoffs. Like Obi Toppin, one run. Like, they have never done it with the squad. Siakam's the only guy with like real playoff tested experience. Miles Turner, like a little bit. They're just young. They just don't know what they're doing. Right. If the game had ended in regulation, if the Celtics had not hit that 3-pointer, David, the Indiana Pacers would have finished with 3 free throws, a 25-3 free throw advantage. That would have been the least of any team in conference finals history had ended in regulation by half. The second most is 6. Like the first most now is 6.
Pretty inconsistent whistle. Like we talked about this in the previous series too. And I think that's it. Brown and Tatum are going to get those. A lot of undeserved, a lot of grifting, a lot of kind of complaining and hoping for those calls. And you can call it the Tony Brothers factor or whatever. But at the same time, just that huge disparity. And there were a number of possessions where, Indiana would get the call on one end, Boston would get the same play, and they would get the call on their end. And you kind of wonder how Indiana is supposed to handle that, knowing that they're not going to get those calls. And you look at Siakam specifically, 0 free throw attempts from a guy who has an experience, who's as physical as he. I can understand Halliburton maybe not getting those calls, being as perimeter based as he is. But for a guy like Siakam, who's always working in the paint and trying to get to the rim, et cetera, and fighting for rebounds, 0 free throws? That's unbelievable.
Yeah. Look, I will say this. The Pacers are foul prone because they can't defend. And they create clean looks because their offense is so good at perimeter penetration, driving kick, constant movement. I would expect the Celtics to have a free throw advantage. It did feel consistently to me like there was, and like, look, this is just the thing is if Boston got this bad whistle, I understand that like it sounds like I would not be giving them credit. I promise, like I would be. I'd be like, wow, the Celtics got a bad whistle here. Like I've watched this enough. Like the Pacers just got a bad whistle. There were bump fouls, and Nembhard clearly got held on Al Horford's strip that led to a run out dunk on a Jason Tatum touch foul. And like that kind of sequence is extremely massive. And like, yeah, they're at home and they get the breaks. But I will say, just to kind of wrap up, I don't think anything's stopping Boston from winning the title. And it's not even about like really how, like, it's not about how dominant they are, because I don't think they have been, but nothing is going against them. Nothing. Like Porzingis got hurt. That's some adversity. But even then, it's just not enough. Like everything that they need to have happen has fallen into place for them. And I think they're winning the title.
So you're discounting anybody who comes out of the West, either Dallas or Minnesota, and I know we'll talk about that. I mean, look, they'll make it competitive. I think. I still think if Minnesota advances, I like their chances against Boston. I think they can defend them well enough, and I think they can do just enough offensively to keep pace with Boston. I give the edge to Boston offensively, but I give Minnesota the edge defensively. I think Dallas matches up with them well too. And again, this is kind of discounting that maybe Indiana might have a chance to even possibly win the series. I don't think that's likely, but again, that is a possibility. They have been healthy at a point in time when a lot of teams haven't been, with the exception of Porzingis. And look, we should also mention reporting coming out before the game that Porzingis is expected back for Game 4 of this series. He might not even be needed. Again, this was possibly Indiana's best chance at making this a very competitive series. We'll see how they respond. But if they can get Porzingis back and slowly kind of work him in, and he can continue to stay healthy, it'll be a strong push for what you're saying in terms of Boston being able to secure the title.
Well, I'll tell you why it is that I think that the Celtics are likely to beat the Western Conference winner when they advance to the finals, because we'll preview the Western Conference Finals up next here on Locked On NBA. This show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. Great trick. There are tickets available after tip-off for almost any sporting event. Just wait. If you're trying to catch a baseball game, you can miss that first inning. You know you can. You'll be able to breeze into the stadium and be able to get your seats. You'll be able to get easier lines of concessions. It'll all be great. You can do that with Game Time. They've also got zone deals where you can save even more with the section, and then you let Game Time choose the seats, or you can get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy and get just the seats that you want. They've got a lowest price guarantee, and Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. I'm back here on Locked On NBA. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us here on a Wednesday. Matt Moore alongside David Ramil. Make sure to check out the show tomorrow, as you'll be able to catch Adam Mares and Wes Goldberg. It's on Friday. Thursday is Nick and Pat, I believe.
Maybe.
All right. So yeah, that's right, because we had to switch today because Corrales is at the Celtics game. So Western Conference Finals tips off tomorrow, Mavericks and Timberwolves. I will just ask you, let's get right to it, David. Who's winning the Western Conference Finals?
It's going to be a close one. I really do think so. And I think it's going to be similar to what we saw with Minnesota and Denver in terms of, two really good teams going at it. A very defensive-minded kind of series, too, because Minnesota plays well defensively. So does Dallas. Their defense has been fantastic ever since the trade deadline acquisition of Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington. They've been a very different team than what they were earlier in the season. They've been fairly healthy as well. Luka's still dealing with injury, so it's tough to kind of see how they muster enough offense against this really good Minnesota defense. And as good as Kyrie Irving and Luka are as an offensive duo that can be your closer, can be your great offensive spark, your engines, I still have to give Minnesota an edge. My feeling is that Minnesota can win it in 6 or 7.
I'm taking the Dallas Mavericks in this series.
Whoa! I want to hear this. What's your rationale for this?
Okay, so let's start here. Luka Doncic looked much better at the end of the last series. He looked healthier and like he had rediscovered his smile or joy or however you want to put it.
The swag.
That somebody had gotten into him and been like, hey, how about you don't complain on every single possession and make life miserable for everyone watching you play basketball and play with you. And so he was a lot better. He had a bunch of turnovers in game 6, but he also started 7 of 8 from the field. So if we look at the matchups, the Wolves are built to beat the Nuggets, right? 2 big lineup, wiry guards to get around screens and navigate, cover that space, smart defenders, all those types of things. The Mavericks are kind of the inverse of that, where they're all perimeter oriented. Luka Doncic his primary advantage in one-on-one play is he is an extremely skilled player. Obviously, he's got a great shot. He has incredible footwork. He is so crafty. He has the size to get differential, but it's his strength that leverages his ability to create space. Jaden McDaniels is 6'9", $190. That's what he's listed at. That's not big enough. It's not. He's going to get bumped off of his spot. And if you go back and you look through the logs and look, the tracking data, as I always say, the admittedly wonky NBA tracking data versus the top 4 defenders on him this season, Luka Doncic shot 68% from the field. That includes Jaden McDaniels, Anthony Edwards, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Kyle Anderson. They can't hang with his size. So he's going to be able to score, which means they'll send help, which means he'll reverse the ball, which means PJ Washington will once again be in a position to shoot well over his head as he has throughout the entire playoffs, make clutch threes, and be able to knock this down. On the flip side, Derrick Jones Jr. is 210 pounds, which is exactly the kind of size that you want when you're facing Anthony Edwards. They will take a page from the Nuggets book and throw multiple defenders at them, and they'll make guys like Jaden McDaniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker hit those big leverage shots. And anytime that we're in that kind of a battle, I think this leans a lot towards Dallas. You've got Kyrie Irving. I actually think he's going to have a rough series. I think Jaden can do great work on him as well as NAW. The biggest advantage for the Timberwolves is Karl Anthony Towns. If Towns has a phenomenal series, they can win this series because they've got no matchup for him. PJ Washington will try, but he's still too small. And Towns can space out any big that they put on the floor, space him out to 3 and hit over him. However, the Wolves really want to play on the interior. That's how they want to play. And while they will get a lot of offensive rebounds with their size, if you go back and especially if you ask Wolves fans, Daniel Gafford, even when he was with the Wizards, killed them with offensive rebounds over and over and over again. The Pacers showed this versus the Knicks. The best way for you to combat great offensive rebounding teams is to offensive rebound yourself, is create those second chance opportunities and balance them out. All that combined with the fact that I think that after watching them on Sunday night after the Nuggets game, Karl Anthony Towns was asked about like, what are you going to take from this series going forward as you try and compete for a championship? And Karl Anthony Towns literally said, man, we're just so happy in the moment right now. We just want to stay here. Job's not done, Carl.
Yeah,
Job's
but that's
done.
I get that. But I think that's just maybe he's not kind of phrasing it the way that you're interpreting it either. I don't think he meant that they're satisfied, but I think it's kind of also just accepting and rejoicing in the moment. And he should be allowed to. Like, they beat a really good Denver team that a lot of people favored to win against Minnesota. So you kind of have to accept that. I don't think he's just saying, oh, that's it. We're done. We're not going to look to make this competitive against Dallas. So I don't know. I think that's kind of a stretch on your part. And I also look, you're talking about all these different potential X factors. You kind of discounted Naz Reid. I think he's going to be a huge factor in Minnesota's favor. Because as much as I like Derek Lively, I don't think he's going to be able to keep Reed off the glass, especially when he has that shot falling from the perimeter. He's a huge X factor in Minnesota's favor. I think their depth is better overall than Dallas's. They really don't have anybody, especially, unless Tim Hardaway suddenly has one of those series where he just goes off and finds his offensive game again. That doesn't seem likely. I don't know. I could see your point. I totally get it. If Luka has that shot going and he is as unstoppable a player as you can get in the NBA, then that kind of changes the dynamic and you have to kind of recover. But I still think Minnesota, as good as they are defensively, I think they can adjust. And I think McDaniels can do a better job against Luka than you're giving him credit for. I think he's shown that he can play and defend up against size. I'm not ready to write it off just yet. And look, it could just be letting Luka get his and kind of, you know what, say, go get your 40, go get your 50, and we'll just kind of shut down everybody else. And it could happen. And I'm not also prepared to say that if Luka swings the ball to PJ Washington, that he's going to be able to knock down shots. I saw him enough in Charlotte where he could have knocked down anything. So I'm not saying that he's going to have a big series, even though he has been huge for Dallas in this playoff run. I still think Minnesota has a good chance of winning.
I think Minnesota's got a great chance of winning. I think Minnesota's a great team. I think Minnesota's a better team. I think they're a better team than the Mavericks, but I think the matchups lean heavily towards Dallas, and it'll come down to who can make some key shots, and we'll find out who wins in the Western Conference Finals. We'll continue covering it here on Locked On NBA. Up next, the all defensive teams were announced. We'll get to those up next here on Locked On NBA. Today's episode is brought to you by Betterhelp. You know, we all carry around different stressors, big and small, and, you know, we can try and keep them bottled up, but it starts to affect us negatively. Therapy is a safe space where you can get things off your chest and figure out how to work through whatever's weighing you down. Oftentimes, stress will wind up having effects on your health. You'll just be carrying around stuff. You'll act out in weird ways that you're not expecting towards coworkers or family or friends. And in order for you to really kind of get that out of your system and process it in a healthy way, that's where therapy can really help. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. Back here on Locked On NBA, final segment. Thanks for joining us here on a Wednesday. Matt Moore alongside David Ramil. Glad you guys are with us. The NBA announced the all defensive teams for 2024 on Tuesday. There are, of course, two. There should be three. I would just go ahead and put that out there right now. There should be three. Your all defensive winners: Rudy Gobert, first team, obviously, the DPOY. Victor Wembanyama, as a rookie, gets the second most votes for all defense. Bam Adebayo from your Miami Heat gets third. Herb Jones of New Orleans is the wing player to land in the top 5. And then Anthony Davis of the Los Angeles Lakers, because it's important to reward guys that beat up on small teams. Alex Caruso is your leader in the second team. Then Jalen Suggs, Derek White of the Boston Celtics, Jaden McDaniels, who we just talked about, and Drew Holiday of the Boston Celtics. So the Celtics get both Derek White and Drew Holiday on the squad. Where do you want to start here as we discuss all NBA?
You know, I don't think there are any surprises here. I think it's a pretty good lineup. I think the talking point here is Wembanyama being able to be an all defensive player as a rookie. I don't think we've seen anything even close to that. I'm trying to think the last time we saw a rookie have that kind of level of defensive impact, and his being recognized as that is pretty impressive there. That's to me what really sticks out the most. I mean, on a personal note, you know, hearing Bam and talking to him this afternoon and seeing, you know, that he's happy with the recognition. This is his first All-NBA, first team All-NBA defensive selection. Yet he still recognizes that there's a lot of room for growth for Miami and for him as an individual defender. And the goal, as always with him, is still to win DPOY, but that seems less likely. And also seems like Wembanyama might have that on lockdown for the next 5 seasons, but we'll see how that progresses.
I'm glad Bam Adebayo is finally getting recognition. Not to all heat this thing, but I am glad because he has been kind of overlooked a little bit, and it seems like this season he finally started to get recognized. You do kind of notice that he finished top 5 in defense, and all of a sudden Bam starts getting in there. Like, that's such a key part of this, is like Miami does have to, you have to finish top 5 in as a team in order to get that recognition. And you could say that's not fair. I kind of think of it the same way I think of MVP, which is like, you got to win your minutes in order for me to think you're an MVP. And you got to win them by a lot. And I think on the defense side, like, you need to, there is unlikely that in the minutes you do not play, the defense will be so bad that your defense will not be good overall. So like, you need to have a good defense in order, like, your impact needs to be tangible in some sense. I just can't believe Victor Wembanyama is a rookie. Like, if you told me Victor Wembanyama was going to be the second most highest vote getter on an all defense team his rookie season, that's That's I mean, it's not unheard of. It's like David Robinson, who played for the San Antonio Spurs, but like it's just wild how impactful he is when he still doesn't know what he's doing half the time.
Yeah. It's just a matter of having those physical tools and the speed, the ability to recover, to adjust, to get those stocks. Incredible player, and we're fortunate enough to have seen this and seen this up close in his rookie season, and to be able to witness the start of what should be a great, potentially even a Hall of Fame career. And I don't think that's unfair. Like I mean, those are maybe heady expectations, but I think those are the ones that he has for himself. I think those are the ones the franchise and fans across the globe have for him. And so far, he's lived up to the hype. Like, I mean, a year ago, I don't think anybody would have expected him to be at this point, like, getting this kind of incredible recognition as a rookie. And yet there was a lot of hype, and he could have fallen flat on his face, and he's embraced it. He stayed humble. He's a really well-rounded guy, perfect for the Spurs system, for their culture and everything else like that. So it's been a fantastic first year for him. I feel like we should also talk about maybe were there any players that maybe you were surprised didn't make it, or that could have gotten some kind of recognition there? Because I look at that list and it seemed pretty fair to me.
Yeah. I probably would have had Lou Dort somewhere.
Over one of the Celtics guys? Yeah, sure.
I'm trying to think who I would want. I mean, so like
I have a hard time having two players on this because, again, this is kind of my complaint with the Celtics in general and the way that they approach these kinds of awards and recognitions and everything else like that. Maybe this is a nature of the Boston media and the fan base that's pretty loud, especially online. You can't just have this great team and then at the same time look at what a great team we have, etc. But you have to recognize all of our great players. It's, which is it? Is it the great individual players? Is it the great team? Like, I recognize they had the best record in the league, etc. They had a really good defense, but I don't know. I mean, which of the two players would you vote off? I think Derek White had a better defensive year than Drew did, which is not to say that Drew was a bad defensive player. I think you just recognize White, and you can get at the same time you could recognize Dort, and it was a first seed in the Western Conference. They deserved it.
I think Drew got it because like his reputation, right? It's like he was
absolutely
like they were the number 2 defense, and Drew is an all-time defender. So like Drew winds up there. It is so. Here's what's interesting. So Victor Wembanyama was obviously the player with the worst defensive rating for a team, as they were 21st. Right. But like, let's look at these other ones. Rudy Gobert, 1st in defense. Bam Adebayo, 5th in defense. Herb Jones, 6th in defense. Okay, that's the top 4. Anthony Davis, the Lakers were 16th in defense.
Yeah.
Alex Caruso, the Chicago Bulls, were 22nd in defense. Jalen Suggs, Orlando, they were 3rd in defense. Suggs should have gotten more votes. Is actually my biggest complaint. I would have had Jalen Suggs first team
over AD.
Yeah, Jaden McDaniels with the Wolves definitely needs to be on there. He was incredible. That was the number 1 defense, one of the best defenses that we've ever seen. I think Lou Dort probably deserves it over Lou. The only other guy that I might list on there, Jared Allen, is that I don't think Jared Allen gets enough credit for how good Cleveland has been defensively. Like, they've just been really good. Shea also led the league in steals, but that's 2 guys from the same team. KCP was really great this year, but Denver wasn't a top 5 defense. They were a top 10, and it wasn't going to be able to pull it off. So I do think in general they got it right. I do think that AD is worthy of all defense. I just would probably have Jalen Suggs the first team instead of AD.
That's fair. You want to talk about the Donovan Mitchell rumors?
Yeah. So there was a report today from Kelly Iko with The Athletic that the Houston Rockets plan on being one of the interested parties in Donovan Mitchell should he become available. Now, we don't know if that's going to happen. The Cavs have every intention of re-signing Mitchell, have made that very clear. Mitchell has indicated he is open to those conversations, but has not given, yes, I'm coming back, because he's smart. And so that will continue to be a discussion. Houston's a really interesting spot. Like, that's a really interesting spot. You got Ime Udoka, so you're playing for a good coach. There's definitely talent there. If you go there, you are playing with like Fred VanVleet, and you do have like guys like, even though he's a little uneven. You got guys like Dylan Brooks, right? You have some veterans on that squad. You have some young talent. It would probably mean Jalen Green gets moved here.
Yep.
And that would be a really radical kind of move for the Houston Rockets. But if you get Donovan Mitchell, at this point, you're probably willing to upgrade from Jalen Green if you get Donovan Mitchell, because that puts you back in the playoffs, probably at least gets you within shouting distance. The question, I think, is that a good enough team for what Mitchell's looking for? Because I kind of think Mitchell's going to be looking for a slam dunk home run. I am on a contender now team.
I don't know that a team exists that can trade for Mitchell. I mean, and we went through this exercise on Locked On Heat. You should definitely check out that episode when it drops later on this week. We talked to Chris Manning of Locked On Cavs, and he discussed the Houston possibility. He also, like you, is intrigued by the Rockets as a potential trade partner. But he mentioned accurately that Jalen Green is due for an extension as well. Green, when he was being drafted, did not work out for the Cavaliers. So there's already the idea that he did not want to play for Cleveland. I don't know that there's a guarantee that Green would want to sign an extension with Cleveland. And if that's the case, then Cleveland could wind up trading Mitchell and get very little to nothing in return if Green winds up leaving as a free agent or choosing to maybe elect it for a trade or something along those lines. So I don't know that the trade package from Houston, as interesting as it might be when you include Green, is enough for Cleveland, especially if the possibility exists that he might wind up, not signing an extension. And then you're going to go through the same exercise all over again that you're currently going through with Mitchell to a slightly less degree. So I don't know. It's an interesting one. And when you look at all the other potential suitors, New Orleans was one of them, Brooklyn, the Lakers, Knicks. I don't think the Knicks are a viable option. I really don't. If you're looking at a slam dunk, that's probably as close as you're going to get considering how good the Knicks were this series. But the fit with Mitchell and Brunson doesn't make much sense to me. I don't think Miami, as much as look, there's a link there and everything else. I'm not going through the same exercise we went through last year with David Lillard. And maybe it works, but there's so many X factors again with Jimmy Butler's contract and everything else like that. I don't know how it plays out. You might wind up just re-signing Mitchell, and that was Chris's point, was that they might wind up keeping Mitchell and then wind up having to trade Darius Garland or maybe even trading Jared Allen as well. So that team is due for some big changes, and a lot of it also kind of hinges on whatever future JB Bickerstaff has in Cleveland. It looks like he's out anyway. They're likely to fire him if that's the case. Who do they bring on? Does Mitchell have some say in who they add as a coach? Is that enough to appease him where he winds up signing an extension and staying in Cleveland? There's a lot going on with Cleveland right now.
Yeah, weird year for them. They had such good they had really promising runs too. Like there were times when I was like, hey, this team might do something. No.
Yep.
No. All right. Hey, squirt gun to your head. Who's winning the NBA finals?
I think it's Minnesota. I think the Timberwolves get their first championship.
All right. I will say it's Boston Celtics with banner 18. That's going to wrap it up for Locked On NBA. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us. Make sure you keep it here all throughout the week for more. We'll be back with you next week, and you can catch the show obviously throughout the week as we continue to cover the NBA playoffs, the offseason, and beyond. Thanks for joining us on Locked On NBA.